Welcome back, viewers. Previously we defined science and who a scientist is. Now we're going to look at the scientific methodology or the method of science. When you hear the word method, what should come to your mind is laid down procedures or principles or guidelines or sequences. So it's not difficult to define the scientific method. The scientific method is the sequence, the orderly processes or procedure that a scientist will have to do what? Pass through when investigating any objects in science. This method is in sequence, meaning that it is orderly. You don't bypass the first sequence to the last sequence, or from the last one to the second to the last. It is sequential. It follows the sequence for which it is laid down. So this sequence and process of following it is what is called the scientific method or the method of science. Most of the scientists, big scientists will know today, these are the procedures that they followed in arriving at their laws or theory. Like today we've heard of Pythagoras theorem, we've heard of Charles' law, Gay-Lussac's law, Boyle's law. All these sciences, before they arrived at this law, they followed this scientific method before they could arrive at their conclusive answers. So follow me as we list and explain this method. The first of this method is observation. Observation has to do with the use of the senses to identify an object or a thing or a phenomenon under study in science. With your sense of smell, you can be able to distinguish between the reagents you have in the laboratory. Even your sense of touch, you can identify samples of soils with what? The feel method, even without you looking at it. Such is the power of our senses in helping us to observe. So the scientist, first of all, the first thing you need to do when you're investigating or researching any object or thing in science is what? You observe that thing. You observe it. Then number two is classification. After identifying your object or your sample you want to study, you classify it. Everything has its own class, whether living or non-living. If you are dealing with a living thing, you have to classify it. What class does it belong to? Is it an animal? Is it a plant? Is it a microorganism? Even if it's a plant, under which group is it? Even if it's an animal, under which species is it? That is the classification. You have to classify whatever you want to study to its group. Then after the classification, you have the inference. Inference simply means what you already know about that thing. Inference means the idea you already have about that thing you want to study. For instance, if I bring two samples of leaves, one is blue and the other yellow, and probably I want to carry out research on the reason behind the other leaf not being green. Why is it yellow? My inference would be plants are supposed to be green in color. That is my inference. That is the idea I already have about that thing under study in science. We'll be back shortly to conclude the rest of the scientific method.